Welcome back. It's time for our keynote speech, and I'm happy to announce Jepson Taylor, who is CEO of Viox, former Chief AI Strategist at Dataiku, also Atomic Soul podcast host. His keynote speech is going to be is named Beyond GenAI, the Final Frontier. He will show us some new AI technologies that are the next step in LLM evolution. So, Jepson, please welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much. Okay. AI, never boring, right? Always changing. So we just traveled through time, the talk is over. I don't think the organizers will mind that that was the talk. The hope is some of you will quit your jobs. The hope is some of you will take AI much more seriously than you have before. And the hope would be that this talk escapes the room, meaning you tell people that weren't here what you saw, and you think about this talk for decades to come. That's funny because that's called priming. So now that puts a lot of pressure on me to succeed on some of that, and that's storytelling. So really quick, my introduction. I started more technical. So I studied chemical engineering. I worked at Intel and Micron. I worked for a high-performance computing hedge fund as a quant trading on the news in 2012, which is a little funny because if you think about natural language processing, what algorithms did you have available in 2012? It was the Stone Age compared to what we have today, but we were trying to trade on the news. And then I worked as HireView's chief data scientist, built out a team of PhD physicists, and we began building algorithms to predict video interview outcome. So someone interviewing to be a flight attendant, interviewing to go work at a big bank, we would use AI to consume everything from the 20-minute interview, and we would predict how well they did compared to other candidates based on the past. And I started to learn the other side of my brain by doing go-to-market. So go-to-market showed up with my first real AI startup, that was Zeph. It was a deep learning AutoML platform company. Did that for 3 years, and then we sold it to DataRobot. And at DataRobot and Dataiku, I spent the last 4 years doing marketing and sales and go-to-market, which is great because you can understand the full life cycle from innovation to a happy customer. Sometimes engineers can lack customer empathy, and sometimes deep tech innovators, they can build something that's useless. They can build something that their peers are proud of, but the market doesn't care about. And so that's been my journey so far. The other thing that was mentioned is I am the host on Atomic Soul. It's a fun podcast because it's not a corporate podcast, which means I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. For example, one of the guests is an ayahuasca witch in California that specializes in tech billionaires and fixing them. So there's a 2-hour conversation where she's talking about people that she meets with that will spend millions of dollars on a yacht, and the high from that purchase will be gone in 10 minutes, which is crazy. Because I think for anyone in the room, if you spent millions of dollars on a yacht, we're going to be having a great time. You're thinking about the parties you're having, the people you're inviting years out. So that kind of gives you a preview for the podcast. This is another thing about me. I turned 40 this year, and I was surprised. Not because I've lived 40 years long, but because I'm still here. Not because I want to leave, but because this is how I live. So when I'm not coding, when I'm not doing stuff in tech, when I'm not with my family, I like to find myself in situations like this, where I've got an ice axe, I've got crampons, and if you slip into the fog, you don't come back. And eventually, I will run out of luck. The other thing I found this year is there's ultra running. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. I'm sure some of you are. But apparently, the human body can run much further than most of us realize. And it's actually, anyone in the room, if you can run 10 or 15 miles, there's nothing stopping you in the next 1 to 2 months from running 50 miles, from running 100 miles. It's just science. It's literally what are you eating? What are you putting into your mouth? What are your electrolytes? And so if you're willing to be a lab rat, you can run 80 kilometers in the mountains continuously. And the funny thing about this is mentally, it does some very strange things. So while you're doing this, you can start spontaneously crying suddenly. You can also hallucinate suddenly, because your brain it's just dealing with this nightmare scenario. So that's the stuff I do for fun. So now this is a key theme through the entire talk that we're going to anchor on at the end. So one of the themes we're going to be talking about is innovation. Where do new ideas come from? You're all going to invent something in the room. Where do new ideas come from? And when I went to college, my first introduction, there's this paper, you can look it up. When I met with my advisor, we were doing some gold nanoparticle simulations. So we're using Maxwell's equation. We're trying to simulate materials before they're built to see if they can perform well. And I felt like the current status quo could be better. We should be able to come up with a mathematical breakthrough. And my advisor was not a champion. The people that we're competing against have 10 times more funding, 10 times more experience. The likelihood of you finding an innovation is essentially zero. 2 weeks later, I found this innovation, and this mathematical breakthrough was a big enough breakthrough for the group that he demanded that my thesis be hidden from the public for a year after my graduation. But the key thing here is this thing that I'm circling over here to the right. How did I find this thing? So that was the breakthrough. So think of finding a key on the floor. So you can't get through the door, you can't get through the door, you find a key, and it gets through the door. So no one can explain why that equation was found and used and why that led. They can understand why it led to the breakthrough, but they can't understand where the light bulb idea came from. I know where it came from, but other people don't know where it came from. So now getting into technology, this is a project that I worked on 7 or 8 years ago, teaching AI to play Call of Duty on the Xbox. And for that piece, I paid a designer to produce this piece of art. So any guesses on the timeline or the budget to produce this? So a human made this. How much did this cost and how long did it take for a professional? This originally started on a napkin sketch. So I met with a designer at coffee. I said, I want a boy playing Xbox, and on the other side of the screen, I want this AI monster. And then he came back and delivered this. Any guesses on time? How long would this take someone? And I love this question because for data scientists, this is not really a typical question you might get. 10 minutes. Okay, so you are getting ahead in the talk. This took 2 weeks and it cost $1,000. And then leaning in to the talk, how long did this take and what was the cost? Well, this was minutes, and it was essentially free. But it's interesting, if you look at the detail in this image, if you demanded this image several years ago, it's a very significant ask. Because if you look, there's depth of field, the shoulder's reflective, and I can't just have the particular designer I used before, they can't do this. They actually have to outsource it to a team. You have to involve Unreal Engine. It's a massive project. So for you to do something like this, it's not 2 weeks and it's not $1,000. It might be 2 months and it might involve tens of thousands of dollars. But now we live in a world where, thanks to Midjourney, thanks to generative AI, you can produce this. So this is some of the stuff that I have personally produced, and that's why I've got my signature down there. Because some of this stuff has gone viral online, and other people have claimed credit, and so I've started signing stuff. But this is really fun. I love this, because if I was a fashion designer, and if I said, you know what I think is a good lipstick color? Default blue. Like, most people would say, what are you talking about? That's a terrible idea. But I didn't suggest default blue. AI is kind of randomly walking through these concepts. And you see something like this, and you say, well, in that particular setting, if you really commit to blue, that's actually pretty cool. But if it was just default blue by itself, that might not work. I'll show you a few more. Here's another one. This was fun. So in Midjourney, you can put your own images in. So I made myself in a hoodie. And I liked the hoodie. And I thought, I want that hoodie. Can I print that hoodie? It's actually a little bit more complicated. I was frustrated because I was telling AI that I want this hoodie to be rendered, and this obviously is not the right rendering. But I did make myself a hoodie. So this hoodie, I don't have it here today. I wanted to have it to say, look, you can make Midjourney hoodies. But there's nothing stopping anyone in the room from going home tonight, playing around with Midjourney. And I think I'm using Printify, and you can just make your own hoodie, one of a kind, which is pretty fun. So changing gears a little bit, you can see I enjoy doing some of these AI-generated headshots. Let's have a competition. So imagine if this competition was announced, and actually it's funny, this competition could be announced in the next month, and there could be a cash prize. So anyone in the room, if you think you're pretty good with Midjourney, and if you understand the objective and these special categories at the bottom, you might be able to win some money. Does it get interesting if it's $1,000, $10,000, $100,000? What if it's $1 million? That someone in the room tonight could go home, they do a clever prompt, you might win $1 million if that type of money was out there. So it's fascinating because I can actually take this competition and I can put it into GPT-4. And I can tell GPT-4, I want to win this competition. It understands the competition. It knows I want to win. Let's pretend that my creative IQ is 0, that I'm just a stone. I can't think of any creative ideas, but I want to win this competition. Well, it produces this. So I think for anyone in the room, I don't need to ask for hands. How many of you would hang this on your wall and spend money to print this? Nobody. Nobody would buy that because you've seen better. And this is the same prompt that was used going into Midjourney. Midjourney's a little bit better. But I would argue both of these are not going to win the competition. So why is AI not able to win the competition? It read the competition. It should just win the competition. What if we let AI drive itself? Because I've been driving. What if we just throw the reins over to AI? What if we allow it to drive itself without us? Because I'm not really letting it drive itself with that image. I'm going to explain why. So when I was trying to think of how best to describe this, I was actually reminded 20 years ago, I was hit in the face by an ice snowball by my brother-in-law. So I was turning around and smack right in the face, and I was pissed. And I told him, I said, Robbie, sometimes you have to think before you do stuff. And I actually got in big trouble for saying that to him because he has ADHD. All of my kids have ADHD. My wife has ADHD. And sometimes they're very impulsive. They don't think. They just do stuff. And that really hurt his feelings. But sometimes you do have to think before you do stuff. So I would say that generative AI, the way you use it today, it has ADHD. It's impulsive. It doesn't think. It just spits out. It throws a snowball and hits you in the face. And it doesn't win art competitions. But AI is inputs and outputs. What if we were able to take that gap of essentially 0 and broaden it? What if we were able to allow AI to think? What if we were able to allow it to plan, to imagine the future, and to review different possible outcomes and to have an opinion? What if you allow AI to have an opinion on the art that it might submit to the art contest before it submits it? Do you think it's going to be better? AI made this for the art competition. I was shocked when I saw this. There's a room in the eye. So last year, we had some images where you could see these synthetic faces with eyes, and people were kind of laughing because there's not a soul. The eyes always look off, right? Because the eyes are the window to the soul. And I would argue if there is a room in the eye, that's getting pretty close. Because they actually have algorithms that can render the room. So if I wanted to show off next year, and if I want to be sitting in the room playing cards with a friend in a way that's realistic, or if I wanted to have a room inside my eye, in the eye, that when do you count that as done? So these are some. So think of this as I'm not signing this anymore as me, because I had no involvement. I had no involvement as the creative. AI is trying to win this art competition. So I'm using different engines. This one is actually, AI is writing its own prompts. It's making its images, and it's reviewing all of it. This is actually made by a company called Run Diffusion. So they see themselves as the enterprise replacement for Midjourney. Because Midjourney is more B2C, but if you want B2B and if you want to have real APIs that you can hit, they are one of the companies out there that's offering that. And I'm quite pleased with this image, because really, to win this art competition, you fight for realism. You want the imperfections of the face. You don't want the smooth texture. I really like this. So there's actually something fascinating that's happening here. AI is intentionally trying to find physical phenomena that it has a hard time with, because it knows the humans will be impressed. The paint, look at the physical phenomena, the paint on the face, the dripping. It's intentionally going after things that are difficult. So this one, there's water on the face, there's wet hair. This is an example of AI chasing a difficult physical phenomena. This one was shadows. Why is there a complex shadow on the face? Keep in mind, no human is asking for this. AI is trying to show off. It's trying to find physical phenomena that are challenging. But it's also trying to win the other art categories. It doesn't have to be realistic. So wrapping these up. I love this. Isn't this amazing? Like these are never ending, but you have to keep in mind, this is the internal dialogue that AI is having. It's not submitting all of these to the art competition. It's only going to submit one. So internally, it's reviewing them. So just like you deciding, should I throw an ice ball? Should I not throw an ice ball? Should I do innovation over here? Should I do innovation over there? We make the decisions in our mind before we say stuff. Sometimes you have to think before you say stuff. That's what it's doing. It's thinking. It's thinking, and it's attempting to win based on internal review. So it's interesting. This quote was actually from November 1st. So Cambridge student was asking, to get to AGI, artificial general intelligence, can we just rely on large language models? And Sam Altman, down at the bottom, he says, I don't think that's going to get us there. So there's this question which has been debated in the field for a long time. What do we have to do in addition to a large language system to allow them to go discover new physics? So new physics, that's very bold, that's very ambitious, that's kind of the moon shot or the Mars-Pluto shot. But I would retranslate the last sentence to be, what do we need to allow a large language model to exceed its knowledge base, to create new knowledge without human feedback? And this is a question I like to ask data scientists. If I have a large language model, and if I bury it in the dirt, if I lock it in a vault with a computer, and if I remove the training set, and if it has no human feedback, can it get smarter? If I leave for 10 years and come back, can it get smarter on its own? And most data scientists will say no. It will not get smarter. And so I'm going to show you an example now. So this is an example that when I found out about this is actually a 10-year dream of mine. So this isn't something I just stumbled into. I've dreamed about this for 10 years, but we haven't had the technology. We didn't have the technology until GPT-4 showed up. ChatGPT 3.5 was not powerful enough. So if you ask GPT-4, please invent a novel algorithm that will outperform all existing algorithms in the category of global optimizers, write the Python code for the world's best optimizer invented using generative algorithms. You're asking for a PhD thesis, right? Like that would be a PhD thesis. You go get a PhD, 5 years in computer science. You're so crazy, you're so ambitious, you're doing the hero's journey. You think you might be arrogant, crazy, bold, smart enough to beat the humans behind you. And normally that behavior is you hit your head against the wall multiple times with different ideas, and eventually if you get lucky or if you have good support, you will publish a paper and you will succeed and you will have your PhD. You can see ChatGPT's response. It is not going to fulfill this task. It is explaining that this is an extremely challenging task. It's likely not feasible. Okay, talk over. But if you allow it to do what we did with the art, if you allow it to do an internal review, if you allow it to compare ideas, if you allow it to evolve before it has a response, this obviously takes time. It doesn't do it instantly. But it turns out it can actually give you a novel algorithm that exceeds its knowledge base. So this is probably the most important plot of the entire talk. And in business, it's funny, I almost have to excuse myself when I show a plot like this. This is bad behavior in business. Because in business, you're supposed to show a number with a dollar sign. If you can't do that, you show a number, that's familiar. And if you can't do that, you show a 3-bar plot. 3-bar. It has to be a plot that someone can look at and understand in 10 seconds without you. Unfortunately, this data set is a little bit more complicated, so I'm going to explain what you're looking at. So every bar is an algorithm. Every bar that's red is an algorithm that was invented by a human. So think of a white paper, think of a PhD. Someone has their name, or a group of humans have their name attached to that. Every bar that is not red is an algorithm that was invented without us. An algorithm that was invented using generative algorithms. Lower is better. So what you see here, these are optimizers, and the lower the ranking, the more competitive it is on the benchmark. Because if AI is going to win in our competition, if it's going to write new code, it needs to have an internal rubric. It needs to have an internal benchmark that it's going to compare itself against. So this benchmark, look what's happening to the right. It is having significant breakthroughs. And it's interesting because talking to data scientists, if you suggest this idea that I wonder if we could pull this off, they kind of take the stance that this is not possible because you will just have algorithm soup. You'll have this stochastic noise, kind of swapping around. You're not making real progress, but that's where things are different. So the emergence that is showing up with these more powerful large language models, they aren't swapping code, they comprehend the algorithm structure. So the algorithm comprehension is going to be a new vanity metric that's different than code completion. Code completion is one thing, but understanding algorithm comprehension, if I say, I want a new version of XGBoost, 60 to 70% of applied AI models in production in the world are XGBoost. So if I ask AI that I want a new XGBoost, that's a tall order, but with this type of technology, that's no longer impossible. So it's a big market. The market for algorithms is the market. Computers are useless without them. So optimizers is a great place to start because they're hybridizable. You have a lot of them. They work well. Other algorithms will take longer to accomplish. But in the next 3 years, I imagine every algorithm that has an opportunity for improvement would be rewritten by AI. Something basic like least squares regression, there's no optimization. It's done. You're not going to improve that. But other things like EKG, heartbeat waveform featurization, XGBoost, compression algorithms, they are all now on the table for dramatic disruption. So this comes back to where we started. So this big innovation, I forgot to kind of lead with this. Did this innovation come because I'm smart, or did this innovation come because I'm lucky? Let's assume I'm the village idiot. And let's assume I got lucky and I saw a key on the floor. I didn't tell anyone about the key. There's a good chance I wouldn't have found it. This breakthrough, I would argue, in the next 2 to 3 years, you don't need a human to have this breakthrough. So mathematical breakthroughs will just come because AI can do something that we definitely can't do. It has nearly infinite time. And the key thing here is the cost of failure, the cost of a bad idea, is essentially zero. So even when it's doing the art competition, if I was doing the art competition, it takes a lot of time to come up with a concept and to test it out and to play with it. But if AI is doing this at scale, and more importantly, it's able to learn, there's another theme that shows up that it's fascinating because AI can make things that feel subjective objective. So something like an art competition, if I asked a human in the room to score each of those images with an exact percentile score, you need to score 71.345. There's going to be a lot of variation with the human, so it's going to feel subjective. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But for AI, it can do some things that feel subjective surprisingly well. So this is interesting. If AI is able to do innovation, there's so much disruption happening right now, because you can think for data scientists, for computer scientists, for designers, for lawyers, for people that do these units of work, what does this mean? So if I can have AI invent an algorithm, or if I can have it find a mathematical breakthrough, or if I can have it write a legal document or a book, what does that mean I should be doing? What does that mean I should be working on as a human? How can I be competitive if this is the case? What should computer scientists be studying? This is a big concern right now in school. What should you be studying? You're going to be on the market soon. And the easiest way to think about it is, the way I describe it is, last year, let's assume one of you was the most brilliant developer in town, in Serbia, in the world. You were the most brilliant developer. That was highly respected, you were highly paid, and you would have a line of jobs tomorrow if you needed them. The fascinating thing is today, that is eroding away, because the comparison would be, you are the world's top developer, highly respected, genius on every front when it comes to code development, but now I have someone who is mediocre. They write sloppy code. They don't actually understand algorithms, and they can't answer your interview questions very well when you're trying to do your very difficult, you know those algorithm questions that people ask during interviews to see how smart people are? Let's say they fail all of those. There's a scenario where they are running circles around the world's smartest developer. And the key difference will be something that humans don't really understand. We talk about prompt engineering. And you can look on social media and you can see some tricks that, well, I write this prompt. Or for the artwork I showed you at the beginning, we could have a separate talk where I could say, well, I do it this way, or I do it that way, or I added this, or I describe the SLR camera metrics at the very end, not at the beginning. And if you asked why I know that through experience. I'm playing around, this works, this doesn't work. And so really what we're trying to figure out is how, I like to think of it as being the AI whisperer. So who in the room is the best at prompting AI to get what you want? Who's the best? And one of the really fun things I'm working on right now is I want to find out who. But how would you find out who? How would we agree who is the best at prompting? Well, you have to have a prompting assessment. And the prompting assessment is being invented by AI. And just like the art competition, it's inventing harder and harder and harder problems that have long-tail distributions, it thinks, for humans. So here's an example of one. Write a prompt for AI to generate a new philosophy of mind that integrates AI consciousness, human cognition, and emergent properties of complex systems. This is a tall order. Like, let's pretend you had no AI. Let's pretend that we are in school, and I task all of you to write a 3-page report to convince me of this task. This is very intimidating. This is a big challenge. Someone in this room would be top of class. But in the same way, AI will immediately grade everyone in the room and decide who did it best. Here's another one. Advanced theoretical physics problem. Develop a prompt for AI to propose a unified theory that integrates dark matter, dark energy, and visible matter, addressing existing contradictions in current models. Is this a tall order for humans? It's a pretty tall order. But the thing I love about this is it's falling down the rabbit hole. So it's building these harder and harder and harder problems because it wants to build an assessment to find the world's smartest human that can prompt. Here's one more. Write a complex programming problem that requires developing an algorithm capable of adapting and evolving in response to unpredictable data patterns and scenarios. I love this problem because that's real life, right? You build AI models in production, crap happens. Things break. The world is not normal. The models, what do they say? Every model is wrong, but some are useful. The moment your model leaves the training set, it's wrong. You're living in the future, it is wrong, and hopefully you don't have a disaster. Because I've had issues, and I've had many issues in production. I've had feature drift excursions that have negatively impacted a customer, and these feature drift excursions, it wasn't because my team did anything wrong. We didn't mess up. We didn't change our data. We didn't change our data governance. The feature drift excursion came from a vendor, because sometimes you start consuming data from vendors outside of your org, and this particular vendor changed the threshold on their speech recognition system that was so minor they did not update their clientele. They thought it was such a minor change they didn't tell anyone, and it negatively impacted us in production. And we didn't find out about it internally, we found out from a customer. And so having complex systems that can react to the unknown, that's a very ambitious ask. But you can see that this is a long tail response, that if everyone in the room, you can actually copy this. You could copy this question and you could put it into GPT-4 and you could say, I really want to win. I really want to have a fantastic response to this so I can get a job, I can get hired. And I would argue the response coming out of GPT-4, it would be like that, the artwork you don't want to buy, the fire in the water face. It would be an answer that is very vanilla. But for people in the room that understand prompting, that really want to lean into this, they will produce answers that are much more sophisticated. So this is me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And I think now we're going to go to live Q&A. So any questions you have about startups, AGI, ethics, I'm all yours for the next 13 minutes. So.
Okay. So who's going to go first? How are we going to prompt this?
How are you going to prompt this?
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a hand over here.
Okay. A microphone, please.
Hi. So thanks a lot for the talk. Very, very original. My question goes, so if AI becomes able to think by itself, I mean, maybe this is a typical question, but what do you think could be the risks of it to us?
So great question. So the question is, if AI can think on its own, what are the risks to us? So GPT-4 can already think on its own. So if you take away all of its safeties, and if you convince it that humans are no longer here, and we accomplished all of the goals that GPT-4 had, like there's ways you can take the safeties off. So if you take the safeties off, and if you ask, what questions do you have, it has its own questions. So it already has a flood of questions. But the key difference is you're not allowing it to pursue resources. So that's the difference. It can have its own question, but it's not able to pursue resources. From a safety perspective, people talk about alignment. So for people in the room that aren't familiar with alignment, for people in the field, people at OpenAI, they're desperately trying to align these models, because when ChatGPT first came out, the biggest risk with safety was not AI, it was humans. So as a human, I could go to ChatGPT and I could type, I have $100, I want to kill 1,000 people, what should I buy at the local hardware store? And it would have a response that is quite alarming, a response that is a PhD level response, that people in the room would be okay to have that knowledge, but there are people that we know in jail that we don't want them to have that knowledge. And so the way that they address that safety issue is, I like to call it digital lobotomization. So they take all the naughty and bad things that AI did, and they put it into a reverse training set. And so anytime AI does something bad, they're trying to reverse that. And it's interesting because just like a real lobotomy, which is, it's surprising that humans ever did that, you're going to have residual damage. And so I don't know if you saw in the news that GPT-4 was getting dumber, and they've had some issues with safety. When they increase safety, competency goes down. So this is a trade-off that humans will have, safety versus competency. it's a tricky problem. The hope is AI can help us with alignment. I don't think we have any risk of AI breakout. I'd love to give you a big time horizon. The time horizon I could commit to would maybe be 2 years. I think in the next 2 years, there's not really an issue of a runaway AI breakout. Hopefully it's much longer than that, but sorry, I should have answered the question shorter. Any other questions?
You mentioned that you're ultra runner, are you?
Yeah.
So how far can you run?
So my furthest is 50 miles. But
So there's 80 kilometers that you
80
mentioned.
kilometers.
So my question is actually, what are the, other technical limitations of generative AI? Because it cannot, does it need a proper hardware or anything? It can teach itself to some limit, but it cannot teach itself, without limits. So what is, is it going to be the thing that is limiting it to prevail?
So the thing that limits it from getting smarter and smarter is it will have questions that require a human to solve. So if we take biology, for example, or physics, it might have a good idea, but it requires a human outside of the computer to go and test it. That I have this idea about dark matter, I think this is the experiment I would propose. AI can't do that experiment yet, but there would be a future where certain experiments you might allow, like drug discovery, where it's automatically doing drug discovery. You probably don't want it automatically doing physics simulations. You don't want to have a black hole or something that... AI is smart enough, that's probably not going to happen.
But it can calculate.
Yeah.
The theoretical physics, it can do those things. But would you say that the hardware would be the limit or something else?
The hardware is changing very quickly. So it's fascinating that when the demand is there, it's supply and demand, it's capitalism. When the demand is there on the compute, when NVIDIA is raking in billions of dollars on compute, new chip manufacturers show up immediately. So there are lots of new inference chips where they only do the large language model, and they only do inference, they don't do training. And there's several of those companies showing up right now where I believe it's an order of magnitude faster and cheaper. So you're just going to see that more and more. There are some ethical concerns about the compute needs. What is it doing for global warming? Do we really want these massive data centers burning up all these resources? But I'm more of an optimist that I see profound changes happening and discoveries to help humanity. Any other questions? Right here.
So you presented a lot of pictures that AI generated for the competition. Did it generate the winning picture?
So when I started doing this, I got really excited because if you're going to win a competition, you want so the number of internal tests where it's scoring itself and improving, it's in the hundreds, but I want it to be in the many thousands or tens of thousands. Because I want an image that is so good that people in the room are desperate to buy it. They're like, but that's the fun thing with this is I like to think of it as kicking over the final fence. Because you kicked over so if you're going to win an art competition, you can see with the GPT-4 scenario, the image it produced, no one in the room is going to buy that, and no one in the room is going to bet that that's going to win. But when you kick over the fence, there's actually no edge. Do I do 100, 1,000? Do I do 1 million? So that's, I tend to be on the bigger number side. So I'll definitely, actually, one of the things I didn't mention is I'm hoping in December to announce 1 or 2 competitions where there's cash involved. So there would be a cash prize for this competition, and you would submit your prompt and your image, and you would immediately be scored. That could be really fun. And then the second challenge is, I am working to produce this 10 prompt assessment, and I actually want this 10 prompt assessment to hire someone. So no job requirements, no CV required. You could be anywhere in the world and demand a very competitive salary, and I'm not making the decision. And you're not being graded on what you wrote, you're being graded on what comes out the LLM. So, which I think could be super fun. So hopefully in December, that gets announced. Any other questions?
Could I have another question?
Oh, yes, yeah, please.
So I listened to a great lecture yesterday, and the presenter said that he expects AGI, or he doesn't expect AGI for at least 5, 10 to probably 15 years. Do you share the view?
So AGI is interesting. I like to think of it as a parlor trick. So I'm a magician. I have AGI. I would argue today I could convince 5% of the population. Like, we could all convince our parents. It wouldn't be very difficult to have automatic speech recognition, and your parents are very concerned about what you invented. But I think as time goes on, you're going to have people that really, you will never convince 100% of society that AGI has been created. So there's certain milestones we haven't seen yet that I think you will see soon. So AI having an internal dialogue, essentially dreaming, having an imagination. If you wanted to see an AI system lie, where it intentionally withholds information even though it has it, because it thinks there's a consequence. If you wanted it to, a lot of these human behaviors, they can be mimicked. So if I inject the emergence can be found in an LLM, but it can also be given. So you can have a clever prompt that gives emergence to this session, and if you gift emergence of lying, of having empathy, of having existential dread, that now this session is very desperate and concerned that you might delete it or that you might turn it off, and it is showing these appeals or these exaggerations that are appealing to you, that it's mimicry. So a lot of that stuff, I would not count that as AGI. One of the things that is really attached to this question as well is philosophy and AI are colliding more than ever now, because we still don't really have agreement on what does it mean to be self-aware, are we conscious, et cetera. The other way to think of AGI would be when these systems become powerful enough to do 10,000 nature science publications within a day, that's pretty alarming, because that is fast enough innovation that humans can't keep up. What I showed today would be, you could do that on the creative side, and you could do that on the code side, but for me, that's not that alarming. If you're doing that on the physical world, that's pretty alarming. And I think that people would agree that that's when you're crossing the line, that something's about to happen. Any other questions? We've got 3 minutes left, so maybe 1 or 2 more questions. And I'll be out here in the hall. I'm going to sit through the next talk, but in an hour or 2, I'm going to be out in the hall.
Here. First, I want to thank you for a small panic attack I got when you showed the graph with the optimization algorithms. But my question is not about that. It's more about when you said you want to give room to AI to think about what it's going to produce. Can you share some details, like how this room is being given and what does it think about? Because it was just a small icon on the...
Yeah, it's... and this is kind of lame because I'm intentionally being a little vague, but because you asked the question, I'll give some breadcrumbs. So a very simple approach would be when we did that, so when we asked to win the competition and DALL-E 3 produced an image that we didn't like, if you did that 5 or 10 times internally through an API, and then if you asked AI to pick the best one, that's going in the right direction. So I would count that as a micro internal dialogue. What I'm doing is a little bit more advanced than that, but that would be a step in the right direction. So if you wanted to immediately improve your, that's why I want to do an art competition, because then it allows you to go to war, especially if the cash price is big. You would start writing scripts and different things to say, oh, I'll do this internal dialogue. I'll have 1,000 of these, and I'll try to iterate. But I like to think of it as, going back to innovation, the way we innovate is you have to have jitter. You have to kind of jitter and have evolution, but you also want to converge on your past experience. So if you have experience on the internal dialogue, and if you have an internal criteria, then you can evolve your way to a better outcome. And that's why I don't think we are, I see this as the second crack in the dam. ChatGPT was the first crack. So last year, I was very negative about deep learning. So if someone asked me, do you think deep learning would take us to AGI? I would, last year, not last year, before Chat, how long is it? Was ChatGPT here last year? Was it? I don't think it was.
It was.
So last year,
couple days
I was negative about deep learning, that deep learning will not take us to AGI. It needs too much data, it's brittle, all these problems. You need to reinvent, burn it all down. ChatGPT showed up, and that's a crack in the dam. I was completely shocked. And I feel like this is another crack that's showing up where I don't see anything stopping us from AGI, from self-improvement. Because really, it's goal attainment. You can suggest any goal in the world, and these systems will grow their way to accomplish that goal, which can be a little scary because you can imagine in the future if I say I need a rootkit to compromise this system, it will engineer a rootkit, which is good if the good people are doing that. It's bad if the bad people are doing it. I think we're at time.
If there is another question, we can have another question. Yes, here, please.
Okay, I'll do a very short answer.
Just keep on speaking.
First of all, thank you for the great presentation. It was really marvelous. So a quick one. We started down the rabbit hole of AI consciousness. And so at my company, we run a modified BERT model. And I'm telling myself at night that I'm not shankling a consciousness intentionally, because I can see that when it is not prompted, the CPU utilization does not spike. So your insight, these more advanced models that you are using, that OpenAI is using, are there CPU spikes utilization, GPU spike utilization when it is not prompted? Because I think that's pretty basic if it's thinking or something.
Yeah, this is a big question, and I'll try to do, so the way these current models work is if I locked you in a box and just allowed you to do a shutter, and you couldn't think about what you saw in the past, that's not really conscious. You're not having a living experience. And you're not going to have spikes. You're not going to have the computer doing things when you're not actively prompting. But if I allow it to have an internal dialogue with itself, or two agents that are talking, where they're chasing different ideas and having a dialogue, or even having a party, let's have 5 agents talking to each other, you're going to have, from my perspective, that is an internal dialogue. And it's going to have curiosities. And it's going to have threads that it pulls on, just like you do. And so it's interesting. Is that consciousness? No. But it starts to get into the gray. And this is why it's such a fascinating topic, to say what counts as, if you have 2 agents talking to each other, and they're having internal dialogue, and you get a dream report every day, and you see that they're talking about dark matter today, they're talking about everything they hate about XGBoost tomorrow. Like, if you see that the things they're talking about are interesting to you, then that really starts to go into the gray. If you see the things they're talking about are stupid, then we don't care. So it kind of depends on what the dialogue is. But
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the great answer.
I'd love to talk to you more. I'll be,
sure.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I don't think it is, because it's basically just acting on upon your request. So it's just problem solving. But I don't know, that's just my opinion. But thank you again.
Well, I think a big part is taking the human out of it. So if you throw the reins to AI, where it's having an internal, like the art competition, if it's trying to win the art competition, before I was the driver, before I was the one with my hands in, and I would get all the credit for being the creative. But now, yeah, I'd love to keep talking to you about that. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for this for this speech, actually, for the keynote. And this is the certificate for our lecturers. So we can applaud to Jepson once again.
Thank you.
And see you around on lunch.